Hello everyone, I am Tassa and I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the Totally Kiln It event, which the Clay Fiend is added to the game. So this week has quite a few things going on, and we ended up getting the entirety of the March calendar. So we'll be going over the March calendar for everything going over, of course, the entire month. We're going to be having all the teams in description for about a dozen of them throughout the entire team, and we're going to be going and, of course, going over all the other events that we have going on throughout the week. But let's start from the top and go into the calendar. So, of course, we are currently on March 3rd, and with that being said, we have a few things going on this week. The most noteworthy one being Guild Wars has returned. It is currently planned to be coming out on the 28th, 29th, and 30th. It is basically, at least currently, replacing out arena events. So, arena events are basically, at least for now, no more. And every single one of them are, at least for now, being replaced by Guild Wars. They have ended up coding Guild Wars so that they could do it absolutely whenever. So they could do it midway through a week, they could do it, pretty much whenever. But at this current moment in time, they're just going to be replacing out the old arena events, basically meaning arena events, at least for now, are discontinued. Which, yeah, we don't have a dead weekend event anymore then, where we have no event on a weekend. But anyways, yeah, those are basically no more, and now we have Guild Wars. But that being said, obviously we need to have the 8.4 patch before then. So given that they won't be doing that on the week of, the most likely date is likely the 18th. It could technically be any Tuesday this entire month. However, 18th is the week right beforehand. So that's the most likely date and pretty much final date that it could possibly happen. Though it could potentially end up being earlier as far as the patch. As far as the patch itself, there's probably not too much happening the day of the patch, as not much happens until the Guild War actually starts related to the patch. However, there might be a few things in there, like a few mechanics, a few whatever else they end up doing, as well as most notably probably the Flower Dragons. They pretty noteworthy were kind of teased here and there, but weren't actually added last year. However, we do know of their existence, and there is a good chance that they end up making it in this patch, as last year was the first year ever since we had Dragonite material that we didn't end up getting a new set of Dragonite dragons. And yeah, they're likely to be like very support-heavy dragons, similar to that of like Diamantina or Stellaryx, but more probably on the support side rather than necessarily the damage side, which means they'll probably be worse than Stellaryx, but likely better than Diamantina, which Diamantina just completely eclipsed by Stellaryx as far as viability. So it'll be interesting to see if those do end up coming in. If it's not in this patch, it's definitely in like one of the next two major ones. This is the first major patch of the year, all the way in March, a little bit later than normal, but it's mostly because they were trying to get the entirety of Guild Wars tested and into the game. Beyond that, of course, standard Vault events and a few older pets right there that you would be able to go and snag as well. But beyond that, pretty tame month, other than the fact that it's going to be having a patch and Guild Wars, which is pretty huge, of course, that. But otherwise, pretty standard as far as events are concerned, as well as everything kind of just wrapping up. With that being said, of course, PvP is wrapping up this week, so do not forget to go and do it if you have any objective that you want to go and complete in PvP related to the Season Pass if you end up buying or whatever you end up wanting to do. It is definitely still completely doable within this week period, so if you do want to, if you're only like halfway there and you want to go finish it, that is still doable. You might have to do a lot of PvP, but it's definitely still completable, especially if you end up paying for it, you definitely end up wanting to go through. But if you're just on the free side, not as big of a deal to go through it. However, still a few rewards that you can get here and there. So if you have any seasonal goals you want to go do, season pass that you want to go do, free side or otherwise, it is the final week to go and do so. So make sure to do so if you so choose. Beyond that, other events, we have ourselves the raid event this week. This is pretty straightforward. Obviously, as per usual, he has double magic, double score, which means you technically don't need to go and fully max him out. However, doing so will make him really good at killing out the boss, the Catharix boss. Keep in mind, you cannot use insta-kill to kill the insta-kill. So you cannot use Catharix to insta-kill the thing that would normally kill you, the other Catharix. You do have to go and use your Mudwalker. It's pretty standard, nothing really too special as far as a raid troop, but you are going to need a one-shot, two-shot the raid troop as soon as you can, using a bunch of mana accumulation. We do get a new weapon from this event. I highly advise getting it. It is really good for pretty much every single team you're ever going to do, for both the raid event this week as well as for Underspire. So 100% make sure to get this weapon. You should normally be anyways, even if it is a bad weapon. However, this one is ridiculously good for once. It ends up exploding, mostly because it's color range. It basically covers every color that isn't covered in most standard Hellcrack teams, as they're really brown, yellow, and purple heavy for the most part. And red and blue are two colors that don't come up as often. Red a little bit, but blue not so much. So the fact that this covers the two colors that are least likely in most common teams in this regard for this kingdom is really, really good coverage. Of course, it doesn't end up getting fed off of brown if you're going like a Chalcedony or even that new trip that ended up coming out today. However, it does cover pretty much all the gaps within coloration that this kingdom tends to have So really good in that regard. And of course, it's 4 Hellcrag, ends up summoning a Hellcrag troop. So you can also use it for backup resummon. And yeah, overall works out really, really, really well. Just keep in mind, you cannot insta-kill the insta-killer with your insta-kill. You have to use the raid troop for that. But overall, should be pretty straightforward. Standard raid thing, and if you have Catherics, should be even easier, as you just use the raid troop to kill the raid boss, and you use your Catherics to kill literally everything else. Beyond that, let's go over all the teams, and then we'll go into all the other events that we have going on. So, as far as the teams, all which are in description, we have about a dozen of them here, as we have quite a few events, as we saw from the calendar thingy over here. We do have a faction expansion this weekend for that of Hellgate, so we do have 2 faction events this week. One on Tuesday for Obsidian Depths, which is a brown, think back, brown-purple. It is a brown-purple restriction, and then the one on Friday that's going to be starting up is a brown-red restriction, as well as coming in with a new faction expansion troop, new layout, all the normal stuff that comes with one of those for when we have the Hellcrag event there. But yeah, brown-purple initially, brown-red then. So if you're doing a pure 4 times brown team, it would work for both of them if you just want to end up building one team for both, as anything that is 4 times brown will cover both the current event and the weekend event in that regard. But anyways, starting from the top, raid event, we just went over it. You have to use a Hellcrag team where you're basically forced to have to use the Mudwalker, but you're going to need this anyways to go kill out the boss, so it ends up working out. Just go and use this to kill out the boss, Catherics to kill everything else, you win. These 2 are just for mana accumulation. As far as the lower rarity team, we're doing the same premise, except our mana accumulation setup is a little bit different. Keep in mind, whenever I'm using a Chasm Bog here, this is a legend. However, it is a legend in the event key drop table this week, so it is a little bit more obtainable than per usual. However, if you don't have this, you can simply use the new troop that ended up coming out this week that is basically like a secondary Chalcedony, or worst comes to worst, as per usual in the past when it comes to a lot of teams like this, just double up on her, or even triple up on her. Even just this weapon with 3 of her will get done both of these 2 events, both the raid and, well, you do need to make sure you have Mudwalker for the raid though, but like 2 of her with this weapon with Mudwalker, or for the Underspire doing 3 of her with the weapon is perfectly fine. Obviously, these troops have been nerfed a little bit compared to what they used to do in the past, only creating 10 when you're using a 4 times construct team, but they're still enough to hold their own. They're just not necessarily the quickest option you have, but they could definitely get you through both of the events there. As far as the first faction, this is, of course, a purple-brown restriction. With that being said, with Atlanta being buffed 2 weeks ago, still really great for taking out stuff like this. This is a Black Manacle into double Atlanta, where you cast Leprechaun, cast Black Manacle, cast Atlanta, and you win. And you just have to do that for the entirety of the event if you're just doing a low-level range. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy. The only bad thing about this is Submerge. If you are worried about that, you can go Mechanist hero class or any other hero class that has Dispel on extra turn. Ended up going down that route, as this team does suffer a little bit from a Submerge heavy team, but normally it'll go quick enough that that shouldn't matter. And you can also check before the faction ends up starting to see if any of them do end up having Submerge there. As far as the higher rarity team, of course, we're just going pretty standard insta-kill everything kind of route, and just insta-kill until we win. As far as pure faction is concerned, this is, of course, only using troops from Obsidian Depths. You basically just want to spam the legend. It deals a bunch of damage to all enemies, boosted by gargoyle gems and stone gems, also creating a bunch of evil gargoyle gems over time. We do offset it with just 1 tank, so that we have a little bit of extra tankiness. Its ability itself doesn't really help its tank, just a little bit of mana accumulation. However, it does have 50% score reduction in hopes that by the end, your team will at least be 3 Obsidiaxes going into the final fight. You can go for the double Dark Golem. The only problem with this is it goes a lot slower when you're going through all the battles. So this is one of the few instances where you actually only want to run 1 tank and not run a backup tank, as you will go quite a bit slower if you end up doubling it up. It might make it so you have 1 Dark Golem and double Obsidiaxis into the final, but it slows down your team by a lot going through, as he's not insanely good at doing damage, given the lack of mana accumulation and everything that the team or kingdom in general just ends up having. So as far as the Geomancer class event, this is a restriction of constructs from Hellcrag, which is basically the entirety of Hellcrag for the most part. And a lot of these things have 20% extra bonus this week as well. 20% for your weapon, 20% for Chalcedony. Basically anything that is both a construct and a, like this guy, a construct and from Hellcrag this week has 20%. So that is quite a bit of bonus, given that almost everything from this kingdom is already in that category. So if you're using Geomancer hero class, which gives 50% mana store to all constructs, you're getting 20% on that on whatever your weapon is. In this case, Black Manacle. Chalcedony with all of its mana accumulation and damage, 20% bonus, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, he doesn't get to benefit from the magic there, though. But basically, we're using 2 brown links in order to get more brown whenever we end up getting brown here. We're using unique troops so that we end up getting magic bonus here, just so we can kill a little bit easier. And of course, that combined with the 20% extra bonus we have is going to be a really hefty black mana goal. And you just keep spamming black mana goal into a pretty standard Thursday event week, just with a lot better of a team compared to normal as far as the overall setup that you can end up running for it, which doesn't normally happen. Normally, you just go like one troop, spam the other one that just helps you mana accumulate, and that's it. But we actually have a solid team for once for the Thursday class event. That isn't just like spam a little bit extra mana. Anyways, as far as Underspire, very similar to how you run the raid event, as they are both the exact same restriction. The only difference is you are not forced to have to use a raid troop this time around. You still can if you want to, but you probably have a better option, most notably just replacing it with another Chalcedony, more often than not. But, of course, we're still going to be using this weapon. Just a really good mana accumulation weapon. Honestly, I think I showed this for all 4 teams. I was originally going to do, like, the other really good one back in the past, which was that one Labyrinth one, whatever this one was called. There was, like, a brown-purple book. It's still really good. It depends on your team context. But the Isidium Librum was one of the other ones that is pretty common from this kingdom that's run a lot. The biggest issue with running this into a pure team, though, is a lot of things in this kingdom already use brown or purple, or literally both. And it has a lot of mana conflict if you end up using it, whereas this red-blue one generally covers things that you aren't using at all, or at least one color that you're not using. In this case, red, and a lot of other teams blue. But, yeah, basically this covers whatever gaps you have. And here, of course, we're covering every color because of that. Because between this Catherics and a mass mana accumulator with brown, or, the brown storm guy, he ends up conjuring a brown storm when his turn begins, as well as, of course, exploding a bunch of brown. But with that triple combo with one other thing, you end up covering every single color, just between the 3. So the other one's pretty flexible depending on things that come in the future, with the Clay Fiend that came out today not being that bad as far as mana accumulation for it. You generally want to run this when you're not pure construct in this kingdom. Otherwise, run Chalcedony. The main reason for this is if you're running Catherics, he's not a construct. He's simply a boss. Whereas this will always do its max mana accumulation regardless if your full team is construct or not, which is one benefit that it has actually over Chalcedony. Even though its secondary effect is way worse than hers, and her chance of chance of mana accumulating is a bit worse too, because decaying gems, while being brown, can override other brown gems, meaning you have a bit of a lower chance of extra turning compared to this. Even though it's still 10 brown gem, it's a mix of brown and something that can override other brown, so not as good of a chance. However, so generally speaking, if you can get max bonus off of Chalcedony, run Chalcedony, but if you can't, aka when you're using Catherics, it is okay to go and use him instead. But you can still also use Chalcedony. You will just have 1 or 2 less brown spam compared to normal. But of course, when you are using a 4x construct team like this one, you can end up going down the route of bringing her back in, and even use both of them together, or just double replace it. The only reason we're doing a unique one is we do get an extra bit of magic, so that ends up helping out a little bit, as well as a little bit of extra tank ability, which in early game you might end up needing overall. Keep in mind, in all the low rarity teams here, I did end up showing Kizernabog. He is a legend, of course. However, he is an event key drop table, so he's a little bit easier to get this week, and his brown storm is also just so valuable in the context of this kingdom. But if you don't end up having him, you can end up easily replacing him out in pretty much any team for either a Chalcedony or a Clay Fiend, as the Clay Fiend you just get for glory this week, and Chalcedony is just a overall good troop that you can literally replace everything else out on this team other than your hero weapon and be perfectly fine just running 3 of her in most of the teams. Just make sure if you're doing that on raid to, of course, be including your raid troop as one of them. Beyond that, where are we right now? Geomancer, Underspire Low. We did that one, right? Yep. All right. So, faction event. So, faction event this weekend is a brown-red? Yeah, brown-red. So, it is a brown-red restriction this week, so we can end up running a pretty quick kill Guards Avatar, Surqua, and Headley team, and just running that for the lower level range. For the higher level range, of course, just running a standard insta-kill team, using a turn to empower Harpy Mage, essentially, into Wand of Stars, and just getting over a mana accumulation for our double insta-kill. And as far as the faction event weekend, we have ourselves the Judge of the Dead. So we end up having a Hellgate one. So with this, we can end up just using a soul-boosted Hellgate and just go and AoE him. We are doing double here, as this guy has no tank ability at all, so you're very likely to lose him at some point. As long as you go into the final fight with 1 Charonus and double Judge of the Dead, you should be fine. Unlike the other faction event that we have this Tuesday, he does get quite a bit of extra damage, boosted by the amount of souls. While the other thing does have boost ratio, this is a lot more of a consistent boost ratio to end up getting. And yeah, he should be hitting a little bit harder, so going 1 less should be fine. The other big issue is this has no amount of score reduction at all, so it's very likely to die at some point, especially if you have lower stats. So, oh no, no, come back! I need another one! No, come back! I wasn't trying to remove you! No! Come back! There we go. Anyways, That's the team, and all of which are in description below. And there's one last thing I want to go do, and probably mess with on stream tonight when we go stream here in the channel at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But I want to go and mess with the new legend. So I'm not going to cover a separate video for him like we will be for the Mythic this Friday, as we are going to be getting a new Mythic this Friday. This is the first Friday of the month. We will be covering a video for that. However, this is the money-locked Kingdom Pass troop. So of course, you probably were killing a lot of Battle Crashers the last 2 weeks and seeing this guy pop up a lot. And if you bought the paid pass, you end up getting a copy of him if you end up finishing it out. And he ends up having a 50% mana start to all centaurs. This is potentially the thing that finally makes centaurs kind of interesting as far as being usable. So let's actually go show that just real quick. Since we're not going to be covering a whole separate video on him, though we will be messing around with him between now and later as well on stream. But he's relevant enough to cover, but not relevant enough to cover like a whole thing of teams. As what we're showing right now, I'm pretty sure is the strongest team you can really get out of him in the current state of the game. Obviously, that could vary over time as more options come. But basically, Wordbreaker, when doing 50% mana start with dragons, is generally considered a pretty bad dragon in that regard. Because obviously, dragon is very concentrated with things that hit all enemies. And he's not too unique in that regard with a really high mana cost compared to the billion other dragons that could do similar that you already have access to. However, one thing that he's a bit more unique on is centaurs. A mechanic like this underneath centaurs is way more unique compared to that same category in dragon. So now whenever you're running 4 times Divinian Fields or 4 times centaur, which this team is both, ends up working out kind of interesting as both of them got a huge buff by having this 50%. And of course, we do have access to wild cards too. So every single time we end up having a bunch of wild cards on the board, which we can end up getting off of this guy. He ends up creating a bunch of wild cards. This thing has Devour rate based on it. So he has a base 10%, and for every wild card on the board, you have an even higher chance. So if you end up casting, let me take that real quick, and end up casting this, he ends up hitting a bunch of times and putting a bunch of wild cards. Ideally, that will end up extra turning, but for whatever wild cards still remain by the end of it, we can end up utilizing that to go and try to devour. So we end up going for that. Unfortunately, did not get the second devour there, but of course, could just keep board breaking. Any devourer it gets a ton of skull damage. As you can see, we just absolutely obliterate anything we end up doing there. Obviously, keep going for ward breaker here and there if you need to go and get a board clear, if you have no alignment for anything else. Use mana stars for bless or curse as you need applicable, and just kill out with whatever else you have. And yeah, it's pretty much as simple as that. It's an actual viable centaur team. They do exist now. Unfortunately, this troop is currently money locked in the current state of the game. He will be available in the future. You'll be able to get him in the Glory Gem Guild and VIP chests in a couple months if you didn't already get him from the Season Pass, or from the Kingdom Pass, I mean. And you'll also be able to get him, or should be able to get him, in the next time Divinian Fields is available. You should be able to get him in the event key drop table. He will also probably sometime this year rotate in the Soul Forge, so you will also be able to go and Soul Forge for him. But if you show this team, just don't really want to cover a whole video on it, but that one particular team is one of the more noteworthy ones you can end up running. So if you do want to end up doing that and you end up getting him from the Kingdom Pass, definitely a team to consider. And of course, if we ever have any kind of restriction related to those two types, Divinian Fields or Centaurs, they definitely have a big buff if you end up having that 50% all Centaur buff. So definitely worth considering. Anyways, Tuesday events, or weekly events. So this Tuesday, we have ourselves the Obsidian Depths faction event, as we mentioned. Wednesday, we're getting one of the Hellcrag pets there. Thursday, we have ourselves the Geomancer class, which is pretty noteworthy, 50% mana start to all constructs, which is pretty much the entirety of Hellcrag. And this Friday, as we mentioned, we are getting a faction event of Hell's Gate, which is a brown-red restriction for that of Hell's Gate. So we'll be getting a new troop, a new setup, and everything else that's going to be coming with that. As far as Soul Forge is concerned, maybe a new Dragon Egg soon, TM. But beyond that, anything worthwhile here? I didn't actually check earlier. Let's see. Doesn't look like it. You're not anything relevant right now. Oh, Void Dragon's actually kind of interesting. Oh, and Coronas. All right, we got a couple here. So Void Dragon is basically budget Stellarex, kind of. It's in the category of Ella McGrim-like troops. I mentioned them like that because that was the first one that got this mechanic. It's also quite fitting because they also both do purple. But basically, it's a troop type that creates a bunch of a color based on some kind of condition. This one, like for example, Ella McGrim is based on burning. There's a yellow one that does it based on bless on your team, so on and so forth. There's one that does it based on curse and does like curse gems with it into brown gems. However, the one thing that's noteworthy about them is they all have a condition and they all feed mana back into themselves. However, this one is a bit different. So the other ones end up creating 9 to 13 boosted by 1 based on their condition. However, this one just does the full range with no condition at all, meaning you don't need the team to be cursed, you don't need the team to be burned, you don't need your team to be blessed or anything like that. It has completely unconditional, but it simply does a random number throughout the entire range. On average, of course, doing about 11 gem spawn every single time. This is not horrible. Ends up hitting all enemies, has a decent-ish extra turn rate, and does not require you to put another troop on your team in order to meet the condition, like a lot of LOL Magrim-like troops. And one thing that's really nice too is it gains 2 purple magic to all purple, it itself gains 2 magic when matching for purple gems. So not as good as the purple dragons like the Celestial, the gem ones that end up doing it to your entire team when you end up doing that. However, he still feeds a bunch of extra magic to himself, so you can end up stacking a bunch. He's basically completely self-sufficient is the main gimmick that he has compared to the other ones. He already has the buff that he needs for himself. He already has the gem spawn that he needs for himself. All you really need to do is put him on a team, just keep spamming him and hope you get lucky. Works particularly good if you have a purple storm active as well, so it's interesting. It works somewhat like Stellarix in the sense that it's a full AoE that can kind of loop into itself. Obviously, there's other things that could do that too, like Truffle and the such, but it's a decent amount more damage in a lot of contexts when you're building him up around like dragons into Purple Storm and everything else. It's also nice that he only creates 1 color rather than a mix, though it does not have auto extra turn or any extra turn potential beyond actually landing its gems. But there are some situations where you end up bringing it out, particularly if you don't own Stellarix. Beyond that, Kronos is a very, very gimmicky troop that is, I feel like I never use, but is worth mentioning. It enchants all allies when it gets an extra turn, which makes it one of the better enchanters in the entire game, though Mistralis is normally used over it and covers the exact opposite colors as what he does, being brown, yellow, and blue. Beyond that, though, he deals a bunch of damage to all enemies, then converts all blue gems into Hourglass gems. One thing that's really noteworthy about him is currently Hourglass gems do override freeze. When we get some mechanic later this year, we don't know if this will actually override the extra turn mechanic, but if it does, this will be kind of interesting, because Hourglass gems, if you could override like the thing that stops extra turns, I highly doubt it will. But if it does, this is going to be a really relevant troop, and this is probably the second to last time, if not the last time, prior to us getting that new mechanic later this year. That will allow us to like cancel out extra turns and a bunch of other various effects. We don't really know how it's going to work, but they were talking about it last year, but it's likely coming later this year. We don't know. It could be summer, could be late this year, like more towards winter. But this is probably the last or second to last time you can get him before then, so it might be worthwhile. Even if you don't have to worry about it too much. Daughter of Time is a good alternative to him, and generally that's one of the reasons why he's not really ran, is Daughter of Time is normally actually better than it unless you really need the enchant value. And normally you don't, because if your whole plan is to extra turn spam, why do you need enchant where you basically lose your turn to get mana? He has a really weird combination in that regard, but still worth mentioning just in case, as he is one of the core Hourglass extra turn spam mechanics within the game, particularly under the high rarity category. As far as weapons are concerned, the most relevant one this entire week you can already get for free, or not for free, but you know, if you go 3 tiers into the current raid event. So not really much to mention there. The only one I could think of is the Labyrinth, but I believe you get this Labyrinth on Tuesday. So if you are going to pick up that weapon, make sure to get that tomorrow, as I believe it's only available on Tuesday from the faction shop. So make sure to get that then. That one ends up doing a summon and does a bunch of explodes. That one brown-purple book we were showing earlier. Even though nowadays this is pretty much just a better version of it at this point. But the Blood Ruby. However, it's still good to go get the other one. There's a lot of team context outside the context of this week where it's better. Actually, overall, I would even say that brown-purple book is better than this weapon. The only reason this weapon is so much better this week is it's a lot of Hellcrag restriction this week for both Raid and Underspire. So for this particular week, it's really good. But on a general, just average week, the brown-purple book that's available tomorrow is better. So either get that book tomorrow when it's available in Soulforge, or get it from the faction event itself by throwing some gems at it tomorrow. But beyond that, those are the only 2 noteworthy ones. The brown-purple book, and this you shouldn't actually get from Soulforge. You should instead get it from the event itself by buying to tier 3. And then get the brown-purple book tomorrow from either the Soulforge or from the shop itself for when we have the faction event then. Beyond that, anything else to mention? Campaign, still kind of in the middle of campaign, so nothing really to mention there. Daily, still doing daily things. Also, we've been getting a couple things like this down here. A couple weeks ago, we actually ended up getting some small thing for that. I think for like 5 shiny keys. I forgot to mention it during one of the videos. I was going to make sure to keep checking here now, because sometimes you just throw it randomly, and I sometimes forget to go mention them. But I'm pretty sure you guys find it whenever you go do your dailies. Like, oh, there's a thing down here. But anyways, what else? Games Guild. Oh yeah, Guild War soon. Does it actually show up in game yet? Let me see. No, it doesn't actually show. It probably won't until the patch hits in the next week or 2 or 3. It could technically be any Tuesday this entire month, so do be mindful of that. It could literally be tomorrow. I highly doubt it's coming that early. It's probably coming way closer to when Guild War is actually coming. But literally any Tuesday, including tomorrow, could be the patch, so do be wary of that. I highly doubt it is tomorrow. It's probably the second to last Tuesday of this month, I would assume. Like somewhere in the middle of the month. But it could technically be tomorrow, so you never know. We went over that. Oh yeah, event key drop table. So Hellcrag event key drop table, probably skippable. unless you're looking to get it to like the 20 plus stars, so you end up getting the extra armor bonuses or whatever star level you want to do to get those extra star bonuses at 5, 10, 20, so on and so forth. Might be worth considering in that regard, but for the most part, this is probably a really skippable week. Hellcrag, not the worst kingdom in the world, but it's one of those kingdoms that suffers from newness in the sense that there isn't a lot of options here. Obviously, it's getting built out, and over time is getting more and more that it can end up doing. But a lot of the best stuff from this kingdom are all not in the event key drop table. I would say the most noteworthy thing that you'd be using event key for is if you somehow have 0 Chalcedonis, getting like 2 or 3 of them for a team. Pretty nice. And beyond that, you probably saw me using it on every low rarity team. But the Kazernabog for the Perpetual Brownstorm, really solid. Has 50% score reduction. Has a decent mana accumulation ability. Not the best thing for mana accumulation in the entire game, but when you're under something like a Hellcrag restriction, a Construct restriction, it is really good. And highly advised if you're going to go for anything for event key this week. If you do not currently have it, it is to go get this Kazernabog guy. But beyond that, I would highly advise just completely skipping the drop table. As far as things that are and are not in the drop table, the things that are not in drop table include all of the troops from Obsidian Depths, which are only from throwing Chaos Shards at the Obsidian Depths. The new raid troop of the Mudwalker, this is only from spending gems on the current raid event that's going on right now. The Tower, which is only in the Vault Key drop table. And Catharix, this is from spending 8 Power Orbs and Soulforge, as well as whatever few other resources it costs. And, of course, the Immortal Terra, which is only from the Burning Chest drop table from PvP. But everything else that you see here is in drop table, with the only really relevant one being try to get this guy if you don't already have him, as he's really useful this week. Perpetual Brownstorm, bunch of mana accumulation, fits into every Construct team, and every Hellcrag team, ends up working out really well with Geomancer and everything. Has really good synergy with Chalcedony if you don't have Chalcedony or want something else. Of course, also synergizes really good with that brown-blue trip that ended up coming in, the Clay Fiend, and overall just really solid. But that's the only thing you should be event keying for. Everything else, don't even bother. It's a pretty underwhelming kingdom other than some of the other ones like Catharix and stuff, but you only get that in, of course, Soulforge, which, of course, is all the way over here. Somewhere's there. There he is. 8 Power Orbs, 300 Gems, 50,000 Souls. Definitely worth it. He's not the first one you tend to go for. Probably around, like, second or third. Well, actually, maybe second. Zolgoth, I would still say, is the first highest priority, but he's definitely a good second one to go for if you want to go, like, Zolgoth, Catharix for Underspire. Really great combo. I think we even showed it this week, and if we didn't, you know, you just throw it in with, like, Wand with 1 mana accumulation, you're good to go. Really good for killing out high-level stuff because they both have insta-kill, and they cover a lot of color range. Actually, I believe they cover every color range, actually, because they're opposite color. Anyways, other things. The troop. So we kind of mentioned him a lot of times. At this point, we're pretty much already gone over him, but of course, if you go to shop and go over to weekly event, we have ourselves the Clay Fiend this week. And yeah, we have Clay Fiend here. He's basically Chalcedony, but without the restriction. He actually has something interesting. The same one has it too. They have 30% score reflect. So we have some 20% in the game. We have some, what, 40, 50%? But this is the first time we've had 30%. Unfortunately, any reflect, like, under 50% just feels so low, especially when they don't gain durability. Like, when they don't have any way to gain life or armor, kind of wastes a lot of the potential of this. Like, Centurion, when we were doing that earlier, with 20%, gets a lot more value because he can actually devour. And when he devours, he gains a bunch of HP and armor. But any of them that have reflect with no way to gain durability, not the most ideal. It's kind of underwhelming a lot of times in that regard. But the biggest thing that he's used for is his Brown Link. He covers Brown Link, so you can end up using him for that. This is something Chalcedony, if I'm not mistaken, does not have, but this one does, so you get a little bit extra mana for it. The biggest issue with his ability is not necessarily his ability itself, but more so how gems spawn in the current state of the game. Not sure if they're ever going to change this in any update in the future, but I really hope they do in the future. But basically, whenever you create a power gem of a color, it can currently override the color that it is. So this is, the Cane Gem, of course, is a brown gem. However, it can override other brown gems. It can override brown giant gems. It can override brown normal gems. It can override everything other than itself. So currently, gems can only not override itself. Like, you know, brown gems will not override browns. Decaying gems will not override decaying gems. However, it doesn't retroactively check in the current state of the game to not also override the things that are of same color as it. So decaying gems, despite being brown, can override brown gems on the board, and vice versa. Brown gems that you spawn can override the decaying gems that you have on the board. And until they fix this at some point in the future, hopefully in some upcoming patch this month, or I mean this year, But hopefully they do end up fixing that, as there are a lot of troops that are hindered. Most notably Ctherix. Ctherix gets a huge buff. We were just talking about him earlier and using him some this week, but he gets a huge buff because he creates 3 different power gems. But those power gems can override all the colors, like the yellow power gem that he does can override the yellows that are already on the board, so on and so forth. So whenever they do end up fixing this, stuff like this and many other troops end up getting quite a bit of a buff, and I hope it's something they do consider changing in the future, so that power gems of the same color do not override, normal color gems of the same corresponding thing, and vice versa. But overall, because of this, he's very situational. The only main situation that you do him on is basically a Ctherix team when you're running Hellcrag. That's about the only team you will ever use him on, but as is applicable this week. The main reason for this is Chalcedony, when using a Ctherix on your team, has 2 less gem spawn, whereas he has 0 less gem spawn in that context. While his gem spawn is a little bit more consistent, he does not have any hindrance to the amount of gem spawn he does, while also still having Brown Link. So there are some rare circumstances where we're going to be bringing him out, but more often than not, Chalcedony will just be a superior version of this due to his the way that he spawns gems being just inferior in the current state of game. But if they ever fix that, I can see him actually being a stronger Chalcedony in a lot of situations, mostly in Hellcrag related restrictions. Really relevant this week, otherwise not so much. But anyways, guys, I believe that is everything. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave in the comment section below. All the teams are in description and pinned comment if you want to go and copy paste any of them. And as we mentioned, we will be going and streaming tonight, as we always do, at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on the channel. And we'll be messing around with the new 50% mana start troop and just going through all the events this week, like raids and so on and so forth. But anyways, guys, and then maybe do some PvP, because gosh, I haven't even finished half of it yet. I don't plan to. The free side's actually really bad for PvP. It's something I hope they buff. I didn't really notice it too much the first time around, because we did pay for it for the very first time just to kind of try it, but then I never did again because I knew I never would. I just kind of wanted to try it for the first time. But after doing it for this entire season and the other season, the reward on free side is honestly pretty bad. Like, you do get some stuff, but compared to paid side, it is almost nothing. I hope it's something that they buff in the future just to give a little bit more incentive to actually go through it, because you get so few burning marks if you don't end up paying for the pass compared to otherwise. You can still get it from like season goals and stuff like that, but beyond that, you get so few from the actual pass progression compared to paid side. So it's something I hope they rebalance a little bit, or at least rebalance the price, because 15 bucks for it, definitely not worth it. And this, the Immortal that is there is like absurdly good, but a lot of times it seems like recently they're putting the stronger Immortal as the one that's harder to get. They end up putting this, I wouldn't say useless troop, but definitely inferior compared to this troop as the ticket Immortal. Like, if it was the other way around, honestly, I probably would almost bought the pass, because this guy is absurdly good, but even if you bought the pass, you're not going to have him that much more upgraded. Yeah, you'll have a lot more burning marks to be able to go get him, but this is the main Immortal for the season, so this is the one that you would end up getting to like level 25 or so, give or take a few levels if you were to have bought in the pass. But this guy would still only be like level, like what, 6, 7? Like, he'd be more than 0 copies I have now, mostly because I've been holding on my burning marks. But, you know, he'd be higher level than he is now, but still, the fact that he'd still only be 6 or 7, like, you know, somewhere's around like one of these right here, he'd be around this level range, like 4, 5, 7. This was what we did from when we bought the first one. But, yeah, you wouldn't be no, like, what this one is, like 25. He wouldn't be that. That would be this one would end up getting that. He would not end up getting that, so I hope in the future they at least consider like swapping that, or not adding like a new Immortal every single time, or if they do, just the ticket one. Because when they add 2 like this, it makes it really hard to upgrade the second one. And when the second one is really viable, which it is absurdly good actually. It's basically like old Great Maul, but almost better, honestly. And you could use them in almost any context, but I'm pretty sure so few people have like the 6, 7 traits you need to go get them fully traded. Because I believe you get at like what, 7, 6? I can't remember. When do you get fully traded? No, it looks like at 5. Let me double check. Can't you just click on one? It tells you. Okay, you get it at 4. Okay, that's not too many, but still, you would need to get 100 marks for the Immortal in order to go and have enough to go and, well, unlock it, as well as get all of the upgrades you need for it, so that it is fully traded. Okay, that's not too bad, but still, with just the free amount, that sometimes doesn't happen. Even when we bought the paid one, like, look at how much we have from some of the ones in like season 1 after the paid pass and after all the burning marks we threw down. Like, some of them we barely even have it for. I don't think I have any at 3 though. Oh no, I do, but that's from this season, or from our recent season. We're literally 0. But no, all the ones from the first one, yeah, they did technically get to 4, but obviously with bad RNG, even with buying the pass and doing like every single possible burning mark you can, it is still possible that you don't even get the trait unlocked for a single PvP event. So hopefully they consider rescaling a little bit. Obviously, we also haven't spent some of our burning marks. So it's not the full amount either, but it could definitely use a little bit of rescaling, particularly on the free side. But we'll have to see in time if they end up doing anything with it. PvP rework part 7. Technically, actually, we're probably getting the final PvP rework this month. So I'm not sure if they're going to be revisiting PvP anytime soon and changing systems like that. But, you know, once we get Guild Wars in the game on like the 11th, the 18th, and maybe even tomorrow, once we end up getting that and then the Guild War events happens, this is probably the final PvP related patch we're getting for a while. So hopefully they will look into tuning that up again in the future. But this is probably the very last one because we've been almost like a year straight now of just like PvP patch, PvP patch, PvP patch for the most part. So this is probably the conclusion of it with the return of Guild Wars. So hopefully in some quality of life in the future, we'll look back on that. But that is the current state of it. And of course, the final week for the current PvP season. Anyways, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful week. And I will catch you guys later. Goodbye, everyone. And thanks for watching.